morning. Come on in. It's probably too late for coffee for most of you. But for some of you, grab your coffee and join me for Coffee with Scott Adams. Tea's okay too. You can drink tea. That is acceptable. Hey, right back at you. Holy crap, China. Are you talking about them finding our drone? Our underwater drone? Good morning, good morning. You send me what? They stole a drone. Damn them for stealing our drones. China. Yeah, it's not China, it's China. Have you noticed that Trump doesn't say China the same way he said it on the campaign trail? I think if you listen, you'll find that on the campaign it was China, but now it's just China. Yeah, it is a noisy coffee maker. They need a silencer on this thing. Federal tracking bill passed last week. Is that tracking of what? Tracking of undocumented, or not undocumented, but non-citizens? What kind of tracking? I gotta catch up on my news, I guess. Birthers are back. Yeah, I was watching that story. I'll tell you what I think of the birther thing. Well, no, I'm not going to tell you what I think of that. But I will tell you I think his birth certificate is real. I've got to watch that the clip of Eichenwald. I don't know what that's all about. Everybody sent me a tweet about it telling me I need to know about that, but I'm a little behind. So I hack his emails. Tracking people with disabilities could target veterans with, I guess I'm going to have to look into that. So, what do you want to know? So I started working on a book about persuasion, based on my year of Trump predicting. So that will be out in the end of October, assuming that I write my ass off between now and May when I've got to have the first draft in. Why do I think the birth certificate is real? You should assume I know things that you don't know. The truth is that I just know people now that I didn't know before, and I have sources of information that are different than what I had before. So the birth certificate's in all likelihood real. Self-publishing has its own problems. Did you think it was fake before? No, I did not think it was fake before. I had no opinion before. That was North Korea's persuasion game? I don't know. That's an interesting question. I'd have to look into that. Obviously, no, I think it's real. If his forensic video is faked, please debunk it. Let me put that in context for you. So let's say you see somebody who's a public figure who explains to you in great detail all the reasons that something's true. And it just looks really, really frickin' convincing. And you're convinced, all right? You watched a presentation of something and you think, wow, there's no doubt about it. That evidence is some good-ass evidence. And so you go to your friend and you say, hey, you should check out this evidence because that'll really change your mind. What's wrong with this model? I'll let you answer this question. What's wrong with the model of looking at a presentation that is really, really convincing, and the evidence is just fucking ironclad, and then you get convinced, and then you walk away convinced? What's wrong with that model? Confirmation bias, no other side. Bingo! Yes, you've been paying attention, people. Yes, if you look at, for example, the argument over the weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Do you remember seeing Colin Powell's detailed explanation of how we know they're there? Look at the pictures. I got a picture of a mobile chemical weapons lab. Can't get more better evidence than that. I have a photograph of it. You know, and it's coming from, Colin Powell. That's pretty credible stuff. But of course, you didn't see the other side. Take a look at the election. All the experts said, look at these polls. There is no path for President Trump to win. No way at all. And if you only listen to that side of things, there's no way you would imagine he could have won. All right. Likewise, let's look at climate change. And I've been making this argument for a while. And it's a hard argument to make because I'm going to say it as clearly as I can, talking about climate change arguments now. I'm going to say it as clearly as I can, but I already know from past experience that you can't hear it. This is the fascinating thing for me. So it's very simple, and it's easy to explain, and all the words will make sense. But I'm going to say it, and you just can't hear it. And it's been fascinating me to watch this. Watch this. I'm going to do it right now. And by the way, this won't be the same for all of you. Some of you will hear it, but most of you will not because of confirmation bias. My observation, talking to people about climate change, is that you get people who say, every single piece of evidence you see, every article, every scientist, they're all on the same side. They all say climate change is real and the models are right and we got to do something about it. What do all of those people have in common? Well, they certainly haven't lived my life, because I get one tweet after another of a link to something that looks like a really, really good argument against the models predicting climate change. They're really convincing. They're just as convincing as Sheriff Arapo, or however you say his name, when he's debunking the birth certificate, or trying to debunk it. All right. The fact is that people can make super convincing arguments with photographs that are just not true. And not only can they do it, but it's happening all the time, right now, or like right around you. It's happening all the time. You just can't see it because you see one side and you look at the evidence, you say, that's some pretty good evidence, so I'll take that side, and then you're done. So if somebody sends you a tweet and says, hey, here's some evidence on the other side, what are you going to do? You're busy. Your day is booked. You can't do everything. You can't research everything all the time. You have to make a decision. So you say to yourself, well, I saw that one presentation. I saw a sheriff or Lippo or whatever talk about the birth certificate, so I don't need to look at anything else because that was so convincing. Or I saw, let's say, I saw Al Gore talk about climate change, and he had graphs and science and models, and he said everybody was on his side. I don't need to listen to the other side because that was so convincing. Why would I listen to the other side? When I've heard that side, it's done. All the evidence is there. It's done. And so the problem, of course, is that what people don't realize is that the argument that's wrong is just as convincing. All right. Now, one of those two arguments is right in some, sense of there's maybe some objective world here, we hope. But I'll tell you what you can't tell is you can't tell if it's true just because the evidence was really, really good. Here's another example. I like to watch the History Channel with the stories about the ancient astronauts, the stories that say our ancient pyramids and other structures were maybe informed by superior aliens who visited the Earth back then. Now, the reason I watch those shows, and I love them, by the way, I just love those shows, I'm totally addicted to them, is not because I think it's true that these advanced aliens came to Earth and did all these things. It might be. Can't rule it out. I wasn't there. But I don't watch it because I think it's true. I watch it because It's really interesting how persuasive it is. All right. These are people with a concept which is close to nuts. The aliens have been, secretly giving us their technology to build pyramids and all sorts of things since, the beginning of human time. And their evidence is just really, really good. Have you seen, for example, the drawings of aliens in spaceships? There's actually some kind of ancient wall carving that looks like an alien riding a little rocket ship. And, if you saw it all by itself, one item wouldn't be convincing. But then they start putting it all together. And you say, man, that's like 25 things that couldn't be explained any other way than ancient alien astronauts coming to Earth. And so you leave that saying, maybe there are. Maybe those aliens did come. But here's, the guy with the crazy hair. But here's the thing. If you don't understand that things that are wrong can be 100% convincing, including photographs, eyewitness reports, multiple experts all on the same side, charts, graphs, science, statistics, everything all on one side. If you think that means that that's more likely to be true, that's not the world I live in. In my world, you can make any frickin' thing look true by just piling up a bunch of confirmation bias. Yeah, Pizzagate. Pizzagate's another perfect example of something that, in Pizzagate, I kept saying it's not true, and people would get mad, and they'd say, how can it not be true? Let me send you this link of really, really persuasive evidence that says it's true. And I would say, I don't need to see the evidence. I looked at a lot of it, actually. I don't need to see more of it, because the stuff I've already seen is completely convincing, right? And I'll have to be careful how I say that. The Pizzagate evidence that there's a major pedophile ring running out of a pizza shop, and it involves high levels of the government, the evidence for that is completely persuasive, 100% persuasive. I've looked at it, and I look at it and I go, wow, that is just as good as the alien astronaut evidence. And by that I mean, it's really, really good. The evidence is strong. It's not true. I assume it's not true. I think the odds of it being true are just vanishingly small. But it's convincing. So persuasion is separate from fact. Fact is beyond our realm for most cases. But persuasion is what we have to deal with every day. It's rude of you to laugh, yeah. Brass lamp on the ditch gate. I'm not saying there isn't plenty of evidence. I'm just saying that things that are not true have just as good evidence. It means nothing. Building 7. Yeah, Building 7 and the conspiracy theories about 9/11. I've seen the conspiracy theories, I've read their ideas, and I will tell you that they are completely convincing. If you read all of the conspiracy stuff about 9/11, you would go away saying, oh, that looks pretty good. Not just pretty good, it looks really, really convincing. It's not true, but it's very convincing. Can I explain why the World Trade Center 7 collapsed? That's an example of what I'm talking about. The fact that I can't explain away the evidence on one side makes me think it must be true. But the truth is, I can't explain away evidence for lots of things. I can't explain, the things that are right or wrong. It doesn't matter. I can't explain any of it away. So that doesn't tell me something's right or wrong. The fact that I personally can't explain it away. Because let me tell you how much I know about the world. I'm done. I just told you everything I know about the world. All right? Because if you were to take all the things about the world I don't know, and then you can compare to it all the things I know, and I know a lot, it's just compared to all the things that can be known, tiny, tiny little thing. I think it rounds to 0. So when you say you can't explain why something could be true, you're kind of saying there's lots of things I don't know. And that's really the beginning and the end of the story. It doesn't mean the thing is false or true. Now, having said that you really can't tell what's true and what's not, you still have to act as though you do, because you can't do nothing. You can't just sit here and die of starvation. You're not built to do that. You have to do something. So you have to make decisions based on totally bad information. And so what you do is, when it's important to you, you act on it because you have to act, because it's something vital to your actual current condition. But if it's something big and conceptual like alien astronauts and climate change and 9/11 conspiracy theories and Pizzagate, you don't really have to do anything. You could sort of wait for someone else to do something. By the way, for those of you who are continuous critics of CNN and their Clinton-loving ways, by the way, I join in with you on some of those criticisms, but I will tell you, in the interest of full disclosure, all right, in the interest of just having a rounded picture of things, that just yesterday CNN invited me to appear on Van Jones' special that's coming up, I guess, in January, to talk about Trump and stuff. Now, the fact that I was invited to be, I guess, on a panel or whatever the situation was with Van Jones, to have an opinion that is as opposite of Van Jones could possibly be on CNN, you're going to have to say to yourself, that is a legitimate attempt to show, both sides of the story. Right. Now, as it turns out, I decided not to accept that invitation because it's January in New York, and I'm not going to fly to New York in January. I'd love to, by the way. I'm actually a big fan of Van Jones. I think he did the best job. I think he did the best job of the Clinton supporters of making his case. Yeah, I'm sure you could have lots of criticisms against him. I'm not saying I agree with his thoughts. What I'm saying is that as a communicator and as a credible voice on the Clinton side, I picked him out as the best. And there were a lot of voices there, so I mean that as a big compliment. Yeah, I left New York to get away from the cold. You think Van Jones hates me for being white? No, I think, you can never know what's inside somebody's head, but I'll tell you just my impression. My impression is he actually just wants something good for the country. Everybody wants something good for their career, and everybody wants to be right, and all of that stuff. But the truth is, I think most of us want what's best for the country. Who's the second best persuader in the world? Good question. I don't know. Where am I on that list? I would say the second best persuader in the world, it had been Obama. But now that he's a lame duck, I think his persuasion is, vanishingly small at the moment. Putin's a strange kind of persuader because he can persuade with every kind of tool, with force, with politics, with persuasion, imagery. But yeah, Putin is right at the top of good persuaders, and he could be actually. Putin rose from a non-special person in the KGB to running the country, and I don't think that happened by luck, and I don't think that just happened just by being smart in some general way. I'd love to know if that Castro story is true. Could be. So I would say you'd have to say that Putin is probably one of the best influencers in history, probably. But But it's hard to say because we don't know his backstory as much as we'd like to. All right, I have to admit to you, and here's the dangerous thing doing these live periscopes. There's a lot of stuff happening in the world, and I put my head down for hours every day to just pay attention on work and leave the world alone. And so here's my confession today. Dozens of people have been asking my opinion on Kurt Eichenwald, and I don't know who he is. And I don't know what the story is. I know that Tucker Carlson interviewed him because I saw a tweet about that. But I don't even know who he is. Who the hell is he? He's the editor of Newsweek. Why do I care about him? Oh, he's suing a Twitter user. Tucker destroyed him. He got owned. That's funny. All right, I'll look into it. It doesn't sound important. Let's talk about Nassim Taleb. So I don't know him personally. I know him only from his public writings and opinions. But I've said this before, that there's a very small list of people in the world who, if they disagreed with me, I would immediately change my opinion, just because they're smarter, right? I'll give you an example. Let's say I had a strong opinion on whatever. It doesn't matter what it is. And then Bill Gates goes on television and says, oh, look, here's my opinion. And it turns out to be completely opposite of mine. I changed my opinion to Bill Gates' opinion right there. Done. Because the fact is, he's just smarter than I am, and he probably looked into it at greater detail, and he doesn't have a self-interest beyond, the public good. So he's credible, he's smarter than I am, and he's probably researched it more than I am. So if Bill Gates disagrees with me on some major issue that I thought I had an opinion on, I changed my opinion right then. Right? Unless the exception would be I think I have some special knowledge that he doesn't have, but in my hypothetical example, that's not the case. So Nassim Taleb is the same situation. He's just way smarter than I am, all right? Just in pure IQ, just way smarter. And within the fields that he talks about, he's also researches more, does a deeper dive. So if I hear Taleb say something that disagrees with me, I'm inclined to change my opinion on the spot. All right. So far, as far as I know, maybe you have some examples that I don't know about. I think Taleb and I are completely agreed on most things I've seen, and I think that Gates and I agree on most things. Sam Harris's name comes up almost every time I do anything, because people are just dying for us to spar, I guess, on his podcast or some other place. My understanding is that Sam is anti-Trump, and so people think it would be interesting to hear me say what I think about Trump. Sam Harris, also much smarter than I am, does a much deeper dive on a lot of things than I do, and I would be inclined to agree with him if he disagreed with me. Again, the difference is if I thought I knew some special thing that he didn't know. And in this case, I think I do, because specifically the Trump situation, because I probably have spent more time working with, studying, and becoming a student of persuasion. So in that minor area, just that one variable, I probably know more than he does. So if his opinion disagrees with mine, I'm less likely to just change my opinion to his, because there's something that I might know that he doesn't know. Whoops, almost spilled my coffee. Do I still study persuasion? Yeah, not in as a rigorous way as you might think of it, but if I see any new article, anything that's in that field, I'm drawn to it. Yeah, his observations don't take persuasion into account. Right. So that gives me plenty of room to disagree with Sam Harris, while simultaneously acknowledging that he's probably has a far higher IQ. I think that's probably true. He's a better writer. I've read his writing. He's definitely a better writer. And he's probably studied it in great detail. You know, he's looked at Trump. He knows politics. I think he knows the situation well. But he might have this one little blind spot, like you just said, that I happen to have some skill in. So in that case, I wouldn't automatically agree with him. Can I outpersuade Stefan Molyneux? I wish somebody could persuade me to correctly pronounce both of his names. Does having a hot girlfriend or wife help a man's persuasion? Yes, it does. Because credibility is important for persuasion. Let me back up and give you an example. When you learn hypnosis, and you're learning to actually put people under hypnosis in what we call the trance, but that word is a little misleading. People are not actually in some weird sleeping state. They're actually awake. They're just relaxed. But we call it a trance. One of the things you learn in hypnosis is that setting the table, as it were, creating the situation in advance is deeply important to getting the right result. And specifically what that does is it makes people think you can hypnotize them. Let's say if, you went to a hypnotist's office and it was this expensive business park and you were in the waiting room and the furniture was good and you saw lots of other people who were, walking out looking happy, and there was a receptionist and she's wearing a nice, official looking medical outfit and stuff. If you came into that environment, your brain would just say, oh, this is serious stuff. And then the fact that you believed the hypnosis would work would make it more effective. So your belief that it will work is part of what helps it work. So you have to establish credibility before you can persuade, all right? To your question that came through earlier, is having a hot girlfriend or wife, does it help you in persuasion? The answer is yes, because you've actually seen it with me. Most of you know my girlfriend, Christina Basham, because I mentioned her a lot. And she's got 2.3 million Instagram followers for a good reason, because she's insanely attractive, just crazy attractive. More attractive than anybody I've ever seen in person. And that's actually true. And so you notice that has an effect on people, on people's opinions of my persuasion skills, because people look at that and they say, okay, maybe it's because you're rich, but there are other rich people, right? I wasn't the one rich person that Christina could be with. She had her choice of every rich person in the world. So people assume there must be something persuasive about, yeah, you can actually see Christina without makeup on some of her Instagram photos. And she used to do that a lot on Snapchat when she was doing more Snapchats. So she actually has gone without makeup, and you'll be disappointed to find out that she's insanely beautiful without makeup too. But anyway, so yes, having an attractive spouse helps with persuasion, because people say, wow, how did you do that? You must be persuasive in some way. Likewise, if you had a past of several startups that succeeded, people say, wow, you must be really good at that field because of that. So yes, that's the atmospherics of a persuader matter a lot. What about Naval? How to persuade that Trump isn't a demagogue? What's funny is that you're seeing all the stuff about Trump's family joining him for the big meeting with the tech leaders, and the criticism was, hey, we elected Donald Trump. We didn't elect your kids. We didn't elect them to be sitting in the room. What's up with that? Now, I, of course, have two responses to that, and I'll get to your demagogue question with this answer. My first response is that the team that got Trump elected against long odds is the team that was sitting in that room. I mean, at least part of them. So his family is very much part of his decision-making mechanism. And whether they were in the room or not, you have to assume that they're going to be part of the decision-making because he wants them to be. If he didn't want them to be in the room, they wouldn't be there, right? So obviously he finds value from them. And whose job is it to tell the President of the United States who should be his advisors or how he should organize them or what's the most effective system for that, whether they should be in a room or not in the room? It's a very interesting situation because it's so non-standard that it's a little offsetting, a little confusing for people. But his children are not like other people's children. His children are literally titans of industry. They just happen to be young. And so one would assume that their counsel and advice is super good, because not only do they understand the world, and they've operated at a very high level with high level people, but they understand Trump himself. They understand their father. So if you could imagine who would be better advisors for this particular president, it's hard for me to come up with any. All right, so this isn't Nancy Reagan listening to an astrologer and advising her husband. All right, we're not looking at that. We're looking at like Ivanka frickin' Trump, who people already think should be president, and the two sons who people think might be president someday because they're so competent and so good in the public. So you're seeing seriously capable people in that room. They just happen to be related. Now, to your question about how do you persuade that Trump is not a demagogue? This family situation creates an interesting persuasion dynamic. It frames things differently. Because on one side, on one hand, you think, hey, he's trying to build a dynasty. That sounds a little, monarch-like. But on the other hand, he's also distributing his power among his family, which is a little not like a demagogue. In other words, a demagogue would, keep all the power and wouldn't give it to anybody. Like he might give his family some trusted posts, within the government, just so he'd have somebody he trusts in those jobs, like head of the military or something. But the important jobs, he actually gave to other people, like the military, generals, or Secretary of State is just another high-powered business person. So the key jobs are going to people who are highly qualified while he's keeping his advisors close to him. When you have that many high-end advisors who are serious people who are not going to get pushed around, nobody's going to push the generals around, right? Nobody's going to push the CEO of Exxon around, even the President of the United States. He's not going to push them that hard. These are people who don't get pushed. That's partly why they're in their jobs. So the thought that he's trying to set up a situation where he's the dictator demagogue is slowly being dismantled by his actions. And his actions are to distribute his power across a whole bunch of different people who are qualified to handle that power. And part of that power is who advises him. And he's distributing that across several members of his family in a way that probably is very effective because, it's the same team that got him to the presidency. And Rick Perry is an interesting case. I'm going to be honest, Rick Perry does not present himself well on camera. That's the kindest thing I can say. All right, Rick Perry does not seem like the smartest guy in the room when he's answering questions on camera or doing debates and stuff. So I'm a little puzzled by the fact that he was such a successful governor of Texas, unless somebody's going to tell me that he wasn't, and maybe you will. But he got reelected a lot, so he must have been doing something right. So I'm trying to reconcile the fact that he was so successful in such a big job with the fact that he doesn't present himself as especially the most clever candidate in public. So I think there are two Rick Perrys. There must be a private one that's pretty effective and a public one that could use a little media training or something. He's an energy man. Yeah, it could be all about that. It could be just the fact that he knows that industry so well that, you know, he's really good at that. Milo disagrees. He thinks he's metrosexual. I'm not sure what that has to do with anything. He likes to, put product on his hair? Is that important to us? Maybe he operates at a level above me. That's a valid statement. I make that point all the time. And here's the point in my words. You know you're smarter than your dog, right? And because you're smarter than your dog. Like, that's how you know. But your dog doesn't know that it's smarter than you. It might think it is, because it doesn't know why you do what you do. Because why you do what you do looks kind of stupid to the dog. If you're a dog brain and you're looking at your owner, you're thinking, why is that idiot playing with his computer when he could be giving me a treat? Stupid. This guy is a freaking idiot. Look at him. He's just typing on his computer when clearly the logical thing to do is to give me a treat and go rub my belly and go play outdoors. What is wrong with this idiot? So my point is that smart people can tell a dumb person when they see him and get it right. But a dumb person can't recognize a smart person, because the smart person is doing everything wrong according to the dumb person, because they don't know what is smart. So it's impossible to tell if somebody is way smarter than you or way dumber than you. And I think that explains the Trump schism, you know, the bifurcation of the country, better than anything you'll ever hear explained, is that half of the country looks at him and says, oh, I can tell he's really smart because he keeps doing all these smart things. And in particular, his persuasion is really good. And if you recognize persuasion, you understand what it does, how it works, you say, wow, that's a really good persuader using persuasion better than I've ever seen it done. That's a smart guy. So you recognize him as smart if you're as smart as he is, or at least in the zone. But let's say you're not as smart as him. Or maybe not as, let's say, educated. You might have a high IQ, but let's say you're young and you just haven't seen enough. So I like to mock the young, but everybody was young, so we've all been dumber than we are now because you've been younger than you are now. So what are the people who are way less intelligent than Trump and don't understand what he's doing? What do they think of him? They think what the dog thinks of its owner. That idiot, he's playing with his laptop when he should be giving us treats. Where's my treats? Where's my belly rub? Does he not see the logic of what I'm saying? It's so logical. Any idiot would follow the science. He's a science denier. The science would tell you rubbing a dog makes you live longer. People, read your periodicals. They tell you that people with dogs live longer. Not by ignoring the dog. Come pet the dog. You will live longer. It's science. All right, so that's basically the people who were complaining about Trump. They're pretty sure that they understand this thing called science, and they're pretty sure that this Trump guy doesn't. But I think the opposite is the case. I believe that when Trump says climate change is a hoax, and I couldn't even agree with this for a long time because the society wasn't ready for it, but now you are. When Trump says climate change is a hoax, there are two possibilities. One, Trump is the dog. He's way dumber than you. Like, you can tell because you're smart and you're looking at your dog and your dog's licking his balls and you're like, Trump, you're licking your balls. Clearly you're the dumb one in the room here. All right? But people who are really, really smart have had perhaps experience with complicated prediction models. That's something smart people do. They work on complicated prediction models. They might work with physics. They might be involved with science. And in some cases, those people would say, in all my experience, I've never seen a complicated model of the future with lots of variables that was ever correct. And that person looks at Trump and hears him say that climate change is a hoax, and they say, I hear what you're saying. You're saying that even if the measurements are right, once you put that in this complicated model, you don't know what you're getting. And by the way, the models of the past have largely been wrong up till now, so why would we think the new one's right? Yeah, if you call that a hoax, that's hyperbole, but we're smart, you're smart, I get what you're saying, all right? So, does Taleb agree with what I just said about climate change? About the models being wonky, but the measurements probably being okay? Yes, he does. Okay. Well, there's a perfect example. So if you're here if you were here early, if you were here early, you know that I was saying that if Taleb ever disagreed with me, I would probably change my opinion to his right away. But there aren't many people who have the opinion I just expressed, which is that the measurements of the measurements might be accurate, and the scientific fact of our human activity changing the chemistry of the atmosphere, that's clearly accurate. Meaning that's something you can, that's just science. I don't think anybody's even doubting that, because anything you do that changes the chemistry is changing the chemistry. Like it's almost true by definition. You don't even have to do the math. But whether or not that makes a big enough difference over time compared to every other variable, that's what the models try to tease out. And the models are a little less credible than the measurements. All right, I've got a text that I got to answer now, so I'm going to go. Thanks for talking. Think about that, a persuasion tactic. No, that's just a figure of speech. All right. But when Trump says at the end of his statement, it's true, that's persuasion. So he does that a lot. He'll say, we've got to drain the swamp, and people will be cheering. And then under his breath, while the cheers are happening, he'll say, it's true. That's persuasion. All right, talk to you later.